The passenger who never got off the last tram on Route 6 reached the Greyford depot at 1:17 in the morning. By 1:23, a cleaner named Daniel Price had called the police. By 1:40, I was standing inside the rear carriage, looking at a dead man who appeared to be waiting for a stop that no longer existed. He sat alone beside the window, his head tilted slightly toward the glass. Rain had followed the tram into the depot and crawled down the windows in silver threads. From a distance, the man might have been sleeping. His coat was buttoned. His shoes were polished. One hand rested on his knee. The other was closed around an old paper ticket. Detective Lena Morris stood in the aisle behind me, careful not to touch anything. "Driver says the carriage was empty when he started the route," she said. "Drivers say a lot of things at 1:40 in the morning." He checked the mirrors at every major stop and still brought a dead man home. Morris looked toward the depot doors. Blue light moved across the wet concrete outside, slow and cold. The dead man was in his late 40s, perhaps 50. Thin face, pale skin, brown hair beginning to gray at the temples. There was no blood on the seat and almost none on his clothes. But when the medical examiner opened the coat, we found a narrow wound beneath the ribs. A precise strike. Upward. Close range. He had probably lived less than a minute after the blade went in. The strange thing was not the wound. The strange thing was the ticket. I eased it from his fingers after the photographer finished. The paper was yellow with age and soft at the edges. Across the front, in faded blue ink, was the name Blackwood. Morris leaned closer. "That station closed before I joined the department. 11 years ago. The tunnel fire. 12 dead." She studied the ticket. "Could be a souvenir." It could. I turned it over. A date had been stamped across the back. The date of the fire. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The depot hummed around us. Somewhere in another bay, metal groaned as a maintenance crew lifted a carriage from its wheels. Rain tapped the roof like fingers on a coffin lid. Morris broke the silence. "You remember the case?" "I remember the city burying people before it finished asking how they died." That earned me a look. Morris had heard enough stories about my years in homicide to know when not to ask for the longer version. We searched the body. No wallet, no phone, no keys, except for one small brass key sewn into the lining of his coat. It had been hidden carefully, not dropped into a pocket or tucked behind a label. Someone had cut the thread along the inner seam, placed the key inside, and stitched the fabric closed again. People hide money when they are afraid of thieves. They hide keys when they are afraid of the door. The cleaner, Daniel Price, said he had entered 1 minute after the tram arrived. He touched the man's shoulder once, saw no one else inside, and found only the front door open. I watched him carefully. The driver, Samuel Voss, insisted the tram had left East Market empty and all cameras were working. Then he admitted the signal had turned red in the south tunnel and the power had failed for less than a minute. "Where exactly?" I asked. He looked toward the rear carriage. "Near Blackwood." The control room gave us the footage before sunrise. Route 6 had 8 internal cameras, 2 per carriage. Platform cameras covered every active stop. We watched the journey from beginning to end. At East Market, the tram started empty. 7 passengers boarded over the next 40 minutes. A woman in a green coat at Leland Street, a teenage boy carrying a guitar, an elderly couple at St. Agnes, a tall man with a silver-handled cane, a heavy-set man in a transit security uniform, and a woman wearing a black scarf who kept her face turned away from the cameras. 7 passengers entered. At the final stop before the depot, 7 passengers left. The rear carriage appeared empty when the tram pulled away. Then the screen went black in the south tunnel. 37 seconds later, the image returned. The dead man was sitting beside the window. Morris froze the frame. There he was, same coat, same posture, head tilted toward the glass. He had not walked down the aisle. He had not crossed between carriages. No door had opened on camera. One moment the seat was empty. The next moment, he was there. Morris replayed it twice. "Camera glitch?" she said. "The camera lost power. The man didn't. There are no passenger doors in the tunnel. No passenger doors." She looked at me. "You think there's another entrance?" "I think cities always have another entrance." The victim's fingerprints gave us a name just after 6. Martin Hale, 49 years old, municipal archivist, employed by the Greyford Records Office for 18 years. No criminal record, no spouse, no children, no emergency contact beyond a cousin in Vermont who had not spoken to him in 6 years. His supervisor said Martin had failed to report for work 3 days earlier. She had assumed he was ill. Nobody had gone looking for him. There are lonely people in every city, people who can disappear without causing a ripple. Martin Hale had spent his career preserving proof that other people existed, while arranging his own life so quietly that his absence barely registered. His apartment stood above a closed bakery on Willow Avenue. The landlord met us in the hall wearing slippers and suspicion. "Hale paid on time," he said. "Never complained, never brought anyone home." "Did you see him this week?" Morris asked. "Monday evening, carrying boxes." "What kind of boxes?" "Archive boxes, gray cardboard. He took them upstairs himself." The apartment was neat, except for the bedroom, where photographs, maps, clippings, and engineering plans covered every wall. They showed Blackwood before and after the fire. Along one burned photograph, Martin had written the 12 names of the dead. On the largest map, Martin had circled a narrow passage behind the western service wall. Next to it, he had written 3 words in red: "Exit not blocked by fire." Morris stood with her hands on her hips. He was investigating the fire. He was doing more than that. On the desk, we found old personnel files, transit invoices, and photographs of welded steel plates. A folder contained copies of safety inspection reports signed in the months before the disaster. The signatures belonged to 3 people: Deputy Fire Marshal Owen Pike, Transit Engineer Gerald Crane, and a junior municipal records clerk named Martin Hale. Morris read the last name twice. He was part of it. "Looks that way." Inside the desk drawer was a digital recorder with no memory card. Beside it lay an envelope addressed to Claire Doran at the Greyford Ledger. The envelope was empty. Claire Doran was an investigative reporter. She met us at a coffee shop across from City Hall at 8:30. She was 38, sharp-eyed, and tired enough to resent the existence of mourning. "Martin contacted me 2 weeks ago," she said. "He said he had proof the Blackwood inquiry was falsified." What kind of proof? He wouldn't say over the phone. He wanted to meet in person. Did you? Once. When? Last Friday. Where? Here. She tapped the table. He was frightened, kept looking at the window. He gave me copies of procurement logs showing a private contractor had stored flammable insulation inside a sealed service tunnel. What contractor? Morris asked. Crane Industrial. The city had already warned them about the illegal storage area. If inspectors found it again, they would lose the contract. The company belonged to Gerald Crane, the engineer who signed the inspection report. His son, Richard, now directed transit security. The fire started in that storage tunnel, Claire continued. Smoke blocked the main stairs. 12 people reached the west emergency exit, but steel plates had been welded over it and painted to look like a wall. The official report said the door warped in the heat. The official report lied, I said. What happened to Martin's evidence? He never gave it to me. He said he needed one last thing, a recording. Of whom? He wouldn't tell me. Did he mention Blackwood? He said the truth was still down there. I slid a photograph across the table. It showed Martin dead in the tram, though I kept the wound out of frame. Claire closed her eyes. When did he die? Last night. I was supposed to meet him at midnight. Where? She opened her eyes again. The east entrance to Blackwood Station. Morris stopped writing. You didn't go? I did. I waited until 12:20. He never appeared. Did you see anyone else? A black car across the street, engine running, tinted windows. Make and model? No. License plate? No. She pushed the photograph back toward me. Detective, Martin believed someone inside the transit authority knew he was searching the archives. He said old files had started disappearing. Which files? The ones with signatures. By noon, the case had 3 shapes. The first was simple murder. Someone killed Martin Hale because he intended to expose the truth about Blackwood. The second was a locked room trick. Someone used the power failure to place his body inside a moving tram. The third shape was harder to see. Martin had not merely discovered the lie. His own name was written beneath it. And guilt has a way of changing the route people take toward confession. We began with the passengers. The teenage boy had recorded most of the ride on his phone while composing a song. The elderly couple had argued about a leaking kitchen sink from St. Agnes to the terminal. The woman in the green coat was a nurse coming off a double shift. None of them knew Martin. That left the man with the cane, the transit officer, and the woman in the black scarf. The man with the cane was Owen Pike, 71, retired deputy fire marshal, the same Owen Pike whose signature appeared on the Blackwood report. We found him in a narrow house on Bell Street, where the curtains were closed despite the afternoon sun. He answered the door holding the silver-handled cane from the footage. When I told him Martin Hale was dead, the strength went out of his face. I warned him, Pike said. About what? About digging up graves. Graves don't usually stab back. He looked at me for a long moment, then opened the door wider. The sitting room smelled of old tobacco and furniture polish. Photographs of Pike in uniform covered the mantel. In one, he stood beside a younger Gerald Crane at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Both men were smiling. Time had punished one of them more honestly than the other. You were on the tram last night, Morris said. Yes. You failed to mention that when officers called this morning. They didn't ask. Did you see Martin? No. Did you kill him? Pike gripped the head of his cane. No. Then tell us why you were on the same tram where his body appeared. His eyes moved toward the photographs on the mantel. Martin found my original notes from the fire scene, Pike said. They showed the exit had been sealed before the fire. And you changed the report. Gerald Crane threatened that the company would collapse under the lawsuits. The deputy mayor threatened my pension. I changed it. Martin replaced the original archive record. Gerald destroyed the contractor logs. 3 men, 3 signatures, 1 lie. Pike first denied meeting Martin, but his route from Blackwood to St. Agnes exposed the lie. I went there at 11:20, he admitted. Martin recorded my confession. I named Gerald Crane, the deputy mayor, and everyone who authorized the steel plates. Where is the recording? I don't know. He put it in his coat pocket when we finished. There had been no recorder in Martin's coat, only the hidden key. What happened after you spoke? I asked. I left through the East Service stairs. My car wouldn't start, so I walked to St. Agnes and caught the last tram. Was Martin alive when you left? Yes. Anyone else in the station? I heard a door close in the tunnel. Martin said it was only the ventilation system. What kind of door? Metal. Heavy. Did you see a black car? No. Did you see Richard Crane? At the son's name, Pike's eyes lifted. No. But his answer arrived too late. Richard Crane worked from the 5th floor of the Transit Operations Center, inside a glass office overlooking the control room. He was 46, broad-shouldered, perfectly shaved, and dressed in the same dark security uniform he had worn on the tram. He greeted us with professional concern. Terrible business, he said. I have ordered a complete review of all camera and access systems. Convenient, I said. He smiled politely. I'm sorry? You get to investigate the failure that made the murder possible. The police investigate murder. I investigate transit security. And last night? Morris asked. Why were you riding the final Route 6? Routine compliance check. At midnight? The final routes have the highest rate of vandalism and fare violations. Your office has no record of a scheduled inspection. Not every inspection is scheduled. That would defeat the purpose. He had an answer for everything. Men like Richard Crane often did. Their confidence came not from innocence, but from years of watching other people accept the first explanation delivered in a calm voice. I placed Martin's photograph on his desk. Know him? Crane studied it for 2 seconds. Municipal employee, isn't he? That wasn't the question. I may have seen him at records meetings. His name was Martin Hale. I don't recall speaking with him. He was investigating the Blackwood fire. The muscles around Crane's eyes tightened, then relaxed. That tragedy was investigated 11 years ago. Badly. My father was cleared of wrongdoing. Your father was protected from it. Morris opened a folder. Mr. Crane, internal footage shows you leaving your seat during the power failure. That was not entirely true. The screen had been black, but a reflected movement in the front window suggested someone had stood up seconds before the cameras died. Crane did not blink. I checked the carriage doors. Emergency procedure. Did you enter the rear carriage? I don't remember. You remember an undocumented inspection, but not whether you walked into a carriage containing a corpse. I did not see a corpse, he said. I took the brass key from an evidence envelope and held it where he could see it. Recognize this? For the first time, Richard Crane made a mistake. He looked at the key before he looked at me. It was only a fraction of a second. But recognition is difficult to hide when you expected an object to be missing. No, he said. I put it away. Your father kept master keys for Blackwood. My father is dead. That is not an answer either. Crane stood. If you intend to accuse me, Detective Hayes, do it with evidence. Otherwise, I have a transit system to protect. From whom? People who see conspiracies every time old machinery fails. I looked through the glass wall at the control room below. Screens showed trams moving through Greyford as colored points on a map. Machinery didn't put Martin Hale in that seat. No, Crane said. A person did. It sounded like agreement. It sounded more like a correction. The woman in the black scarf proved harder to identify. She had paid cash and kept her face away from every platform camera. But the teenage musician's phone had caught her reflection in the tram window. Her name was Evelyn Mercer. Her husband, Thomas, had died at Blackwood. She lived alone near the river and opened the door before we knocked, as if she had been waiting for us for 11 years. I wondered how long it would take, she said. Her scarf lay folded on the table behind her. You were on Route 6 last night, Morris said. Yes. Why hide from the cameras? I didn't want Richard Crane to know I was following him. That moved the air in the room. How did you know he would be there? I asked. Martin called me Monday. He said he had found the proof Thomas was murdered by greed, not killed by an accident. Yesterday evening he called again. He sounded terrified. What did he say? That if he failed to contact me by midnight, I should watch Richard Crane. Martin believed Richard had been removing files from the archive, Evelyn said. I followed him from the Transit Operations Center. He drove to Blackwood, disappeared near the east entrance, then emerged from an underground service road and headed to Central Exchange. I reached the station by taxi and boarded behind him. What did he do during the journey? Nothing until we entered the south tunnel. A few seconds before the lights failed, he stood and walked toward the back. Did you follow? I tried. Then everything went dark. What did you hear? Evelyn closed her eyes. A metal latch, wheels scraping, someone breathing hard. Wheels? Small wheels, like a cart. And after the lights returned? Crane came forward again. His jacket was open. There was dust on one sleeve. Did you see Martin? No. I was in the second carriage. I didn't know he was behind me until the news this morning. Why didn't you tell the police immediately? Her expression sharpened. Because the last time my family trusted an official investigation, 12 people became an electrical fault and a warped door. I could not blame her. But distrust, like grief, is useful to guilty people. It keeps witnesses silent until silence begins to resemble complicity. That afternoon, Morris and I entered Blackwood Station through the East Service stairs. The transit authority sent an engineer and 2 uniformed officers. Richard Crane offered to accompany us. I declined. The stairs descended beneath a rusted steel cover behind an abandoned pharmacy. The deeper we went, the colder the air became. Old water ran down the tiled walls. Our lights caught fragments of advertisements from another decade. Perfume, cigarettes, a seaside holiday no one had taken in years. At the bottom, a chain-link gate blocked the passage. The lock was new. The engineer frowned. That should be an old municipal padlock. "What kind is this?" Morris asked. "Transit security issue." "Who has keys?" "Director Crane, senior supervisors, emergency maintenance." Beyond the gate, Blackwood waited in darkness. Fire had stripped the ceiling and stained the tiles. The old clock still hung above the platform, stopped at 7:46. 12 artificial bouquets stood beneath it. We found the place where Martin had met Pike near the Western Service corridor. 2 folding chairs faced each other beside an old electrical cabinet. On the floor lay a fresh paper cup and the cap from a recorder battery. Farther down the platform, beside a maintenance door, Morris found blood. Not much. A dark line in the groove between 2 tiles. Someone had cleaned the surface, but blood prefers cracks. The medical examiner later matched it to Martin. The maintenance door opened directly onto the tunnel walkway. 30 feet beyond it was the point where Route 6 had stopped during the blackout. An old baggage cart stood against the wall. Its wheels had been recently oiled. On the platform dust, we found 2 parallel tracks leading from the bloodstain to the edge of the tunnel. There was our ghost. Martin had been killed in the station, placed on the cart, and rolled beside the track. When the tram stopped, someone opened an emergency side door and moved him into the rear carriage during the blackout. Morris measured the distance. 37 seconds. Long enough if the body was ready. Crane would have to stop the tram at the exact point. He controls transit security. He doesn't control signals. No, but he knows who does. The engineer heard us and shook his head. The stop wasn't a normal signal failure. I checked the logs. A local maintenance override was activated from a wall panel in the tunnel. "Can you identify the key used?" I asked. "The panels use coded electronic fobs." "Whose code?" He hesitated. "Director Crane's." Morris looked at me. It was enough to search his office and vehicle. It was not enough to convict him of murder. Crane could claim his fob had been copied or stolen. Evelyn's testimony placed him in the tunnel movement, but she had a public history of accusing the Crane family. Pike had lied about meeting Martin. Claire had waited outside and seen only a car. We had a method. We had a motive. We still needed the truth in a form a jury could hear. I returned to the bloodstain and tried to see the platform as Martin had seen it. He had met Pike, recorded a confession, heard a metal door, realized someone else was inside the station. If Martin believed he was being followed, he would not keep the recorder in his pocket. He would hide it. The memory card missing from his apartment was a distraction. The empty envelope to Claire was another. Martin had intended to lead someone to evidence without carrying it through the street. I took out the brass key. Old, small. A hollow shaft with 2 uneven teeth. Not a modern padlock key. I walked along the platform, checking cabinets, lockers, and the remains of the newsstand. Nothing fit. Then I noticed a red metal box mounted between 2 columns. Emergency telephone. The glass had been removed years ago, The phone inside was gone, but beneath the empty cradle was a second compartment with a brass lock. The key turned. Inside lay Martin Hale's recorder. For 11 years, the city had kept an emergency exit hidden behind a false wall. Martin hid the truth inside an emergency phone that could no longer call anyone. The recording began with Martin's voice. "My name is Martin Hale. On October 14th, 11 years ago, I removed an original safety inspection from the municipal archive and replaced it with a falsified copy. I did this knowingly. 12 people died at Blackwood Station, and afterward, I helped the men responsible hide why." There was a long silence. Then Owen Pike spoke. He described the welded exit, the illegal storage tunnel, Gerald Crane's threats, the deputy mayor's visit. Every detail matched the documents in Martin's apartment. Near the end, Pike began to cry. "I told myself the dead were already dead," he said. "I told myself saving my family would not hurt them twice." Martin answered quietly. "It hurt their families every day the truth stayed buried." A chair scraped. Pike's footsteps faded toward the east stairs. For 20 seconds, there was only the faint electrical hum of the abandoned station. Then a metal door slammed. A man's voice said, "Give me the recorder, Martin." "Richard Crane." Martin sounded farther away when he replied, "You're too late. You have no idea what you're destroying. I know exactly what your family destroyed. My father made one decision under pressure. Your father sealed an exit. You spent 2 weeks stealing the proof." The next sound was a blow. Martin gasped. Shoes moved rapidly across the tiles. Crane spoke again, closer to the hidden recorder. "Where is it?" Martin did not answer. There was another struggle, a sharp breath, and then silence. The recording continued for 4 minutes. We heard drawers opening, metal cabinets slamming, Crane searching the station. Finally, he made a telephone call. "Stop Route 6 at local marker 28, he said. 30 seconds. Camera circuit 2. A muffled voice answered through the phone. Crane said, "It's a systems test. Use my authorization." He had recorded his own method because he believed the recorder was still in Martin's pocket. Morris looked at me across the evidence room. "That's enough. It's enough if he stays where we can arrest him." He did not. By the time officers reached the Transit Operations Center, Richard Crane's office was empty. His department vehicle was gone. So was a portable fuel container from the emergency maintenance bay. Then the control room reported that a maintenance tram had been activated without authorization. Its route had been changed toward the south tunnel, toward Blackwood. Crane was not running from the past. He was going back to burn what remained of it. We reached the east entrance in heavy rain. Smoke was already rising through the street grate. Morris called for fire crews and additional units while I forced the service cover open. From below came the distant grinding of steel wheels. "Walter, wait for backup," she said. "There's someone else down there." "How do you know?" Because Crane had not taken the fuel only to destroy a recorder we already possessed. He needed a death to explain the fire, someone whose guilt could carry the whole story into the grave. "Owen Pike," I said. We found Pike at the bottom of the stairs, one wrist fastened to the chain-link gate. Blood ran from his forehead. Crane had called him and claimed the police wanted one final meeting at Blackwood. Pike had come because frightened men are obedient to familiar voices, even after 11 years. Morris stayed to free him. I followed the smoke onto the platform. Flames moved inside the Western Service corridor, feeding on old paper, paint, and insulation. Richard Crane stood near the track with a pistol in one hand and the empty fuel container in the other. "You should have left the key where you found it," he said. "You should have left the exit open." His face changed then. The calm official disappeared. What remained was a tired son standing inside the ruin of his father's name. "You think this is about an exit?" he said. 400 families depended on that company. The city depended on it. My father protected all of them. 12 families never saw anyone come home. It was an accident. Sealing the door wasn't. The maintenance tram sounded its horn inside the tunnel. Crane had set it moving before we arrived. No driver, no passengers. Just 40 tons of metal coming through the dark to erase whatever stood in its path. He raised the pistol. "Put the recorder on the platform. It's already at headquarters." For the first time that night, he looked afraid. Then he fired. The shot struck a tiled column beside me. I moved behind it as Crane crossed the platform. Smoke thickened beneath the ceiling. The tram horn sounded again, closer now. Crane came around the column and hit me with the pistol. I fell against the platform edge. He grabbed my coat and drove me backward toward the track. At 69, you learn that strength is rarely where you left it, but balance, anger, and stubbornness sometimes remain. I caught his wrist. We went down together. The pistol slid beneath a bench. Crane struck me twice and pulled me toward the edge as white light filled the tunnel. Then a silver-handled cane hooked beneath his arm. Owen Pike pulled with everything he had. Crane lost his footing. I rolled away from the track as the maintenance tram tore through the station, close enough for its wind to drag smoke and sparks across the platform. Morris reached us seconds later with her weapon drawn. Richard Crane lay face down on the tiles, Pike's cane across his back. For 11 years, Owen Pike had told himself it was too late to save anyone. That night, he finally did. The fire crews contained the flames before they reached the western wall. Behind the burned plaster, investigators found the welded steel plates still covering the old emergency exit. Crane industrial markings remained visible beneath the paint. Richard Crane was charged with Martin Hale's murder, evidence tampering, arson, kidnapping, and conspiracy. His recorded call identified the control supervisor who had stopped the tram. The supervisor traded his testimony for a reduced sentence. Owen Pike pleaded guilty to falsifying the original fire report. He did not ask for leniency. The city reopened the Blackwood investigation. The 12 deaths were no longer listed as the unavoidable result of fire and panic. The official record finally stated what the families had known all along. The victims had reached the emergency exit. Someone had made sure it would not open. Martin Hale was buried on a gray morning beneath a tree at North Greyford Cemetery. Claire Doran published his confession beside the evidence he had recovered. She did not call him a hero. Neither did I. Martin was not innocent. He was a frightened young clerk who helped bury the truth. Then he lived 11 years with the weight of 12 names pressing against his memory. In the end, he chose to uncover what he had hidden, knowing confession would destroy the life he had protected. That did not erase his crime. But guilt and redemption are not opposite ends of a road. Sometimes they walk beside each other all the way to the grave. Weeks later, Blackwood reopened as a memorial. At 7:46, the time frozen on the station clock, 12 lights came on along the western wall. Evelyn Mercer stood beneath her husband's name. Owen Pike remained alone near the stairs. For the first time in 11 years, Blackwood was no longer dark. I thought about Martin sitting in the final carriage, an old ticket locked in his dead hand. He had entered the tram from a station erased from every map. For 37 seconds, he became a passenger no camera had seen arrive. The city called it an impossible murder. It wasn't. There are no impossible crimes. Only doors people refuse to admit are there. The dead do not ask us to change the past. They ask us to stop lying about it.